Let me just check attendees. Okay, we're doing good. And the agenda for tonight and the materials for the meeting are in the Dropbox. If you look at our website, if you're on our listserv, you also get email blasts for the agenda, for all agendas of all the committees. This meeting is being recorded and it's currently live streaming on YouTube. It'll be accessible there afterwards. If this is your first time being at a meeting, just the run of show is the presenters speak first. After each presentation, the committee has a chance to ask questions or make comments. Then the members of the public, known as the attendees here, have the opportunity to do the same. Subsequently, the discussion goes back to committee. Sometimes on some agenda items, the committee members then vote to write a letter of support or to make recommendations. Just so you all know, to comment or ask questions after the presentation, please raise the raised hand button on your screen. It should be on the bottom somewhere. If you're calling in, you have to press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. I don't think anyone's calling in today, but if I have to remind you of that, I will. If there's any questions about what I just shared, can you raise your hand now? Let's check. All right, great. No questions.
And I'm Joe Restuccia, the co-chair of the Housing, Health, and Human Services Committee, and Maria and I will be switching off during the meeting on running parts of it.
Yes, so I will introduce the first two items, and then Joe, I will let you take over the discussions. And you like that? I gave you the assignment, you'll take over the discussion. I'll take the notes. So we're switching the agenda items just for time constraints for our first presenters. The first item that we're going to talk about is senior services and meal programs in the district. And just so you have some background information, senior meals in CB4 is part of one of the budget request items that the budget task force decided need to be basically reevaluated. Also, it's coming up because of the CB4 needs assessment that's been done. One of the 4 groups that was determined to have the highest amount of need in CB4 is older adults. The other 3 groups were people experiencing homelessness and mental illness, youth and teens, and families in affordable housing. And just for added information and context, I just want everybody to know that I did spend quite a bit of time speaking to folks in the community. I spoke to Jordan, who's the lead at the speaker's office, about senior meals and what they've done, the director at Penn South. It's for the NORC program, they do not provide meals, actually. The director of community building at Hudson Guild. I spoke to Maria Guzman, the Tenant Association president at Harborview on West 55th, Maria Guzman, who gives everyone her love, especially Joe and David Gilchrist. And I spoke to the chief program officer at SAGE, and I spoke to everybody basically about what the services look like regarding senior meals and the needs moving forward. One of the themes that really came out was technology and the digital divide. And even according to the chief program officer at SAGE, quote, he said, "It's horrific and it significantly impacts older adults of color and is additionally hard for older LGBT folks." And so today we have David Gilchrist, the ED Executive Director of Project Find, and Jeremy Kaplan, the Executive Director of Encore Community Services, who will each briefly describe their overall services, but focus on senior meals and their needs that they foresee. We also have Jose Mercado and Verna, author from DIFTA, here to answer questions that we may have. So thank you for being here, guys.
And just one quick note for the public. We have 40 members, both committee and public, attending our meeting tonight, although you can only see a certain number on your screen at any given time.
Gotcha.
So David and Jeremy, you guys have the floor.
Sure. Well, shall I start? Well, thank you, Maria. It's been nice talking to you to the lead up of this. Hi, Joe. It's been a while since I've seen you semi-live. I'm David Gilchrist from Project Find, I'm the executive director. I'm joined by Portia Hall, who is the director of community services, who oversees all of the centers. Project Find is a 50-plus-year-old elder services organization that emerged from a Great Society research project that explored the living conditions and life circumstances of hotel dwellers living in the Times Square area. What the research indicated was that older adults wanted quality, affordable housing attuned to their needs, as well as venues to meet the demand for human connection, information, helpful activities, and food security. Project Find went on to develop 3 affordable housing residences housing over 600 people with wraparound social services, as well as 4 senior centers spanning community boards 4, 5, and 7. We're presently teaming up with a for-profit developer to build an additional 79 units of senior housing on West 79th Street with HPD funding. The Clinton Center Clinton Center located in Harborview Terrace Complex and the Coffee House Senior Center at Holy Cross Church at 42nd Street between 8th and 9th Avenues are both located in Community Board 4. I'll describe our programming prior to the COVID pandemic, and Portia will speak to our current operations. The Coffee House Center is our oldest program, dating back to 1971, and serves a racially diverse group of seniors. In pre-COVID times, nearly 1,500 people visited the site annually. On average, 150 attended on a daily basis to take advantage of the breakfast, lunch, as well as a solid selection of health and wellness activities. We also offer a weekly sit-down dinner, privately funded, as well as a takeaway food packages for center members who have been identified as either homeless, indigent, or lacking a cooking facility. Recently, we were able to secure funding to hire a full-time social work position to serve as a professional problem solver advocate for the center members. The Clinton program was built into the initial design of the Harborview complex back in 1977 and continues to draw a significant number of its participants from the building. The Clinton program offers a greater range of health and wellness activities than Coffee House, in addition to a weekly lunch and a weekend takeaway meal. Nearly 90 people a day attend the center. The program's participation rates were increasing dramatically after we had completed a 2-year phased-in $2.5 million makeover in 2019, but then COVID struck and our in-person services were shuttered. I'll now turn the floor over to Portia.
Hi, everyone. As David mentioned, thank you for having us be a part of this conversation. So for the past year, our senior center locations have been focused on ensuring the needs of the 1,500 people we previously served are being met. During the span of the pandemic, we worked in collaboration with DFTA to conduct over 750 seniors to Get Food NYC Emergency Home Food Delivery Program. We worked to ensure that 1,900 seniors received pantry food boxes, and we worked to provide over 5,000 hot meals to homeless seniors through our homeless meal program, which operates out of our Coffee House Senior Center. Additionally, as an agency, we've strived to create a sense of normalcy in a time in which many of our already isolated seniors are even more detached from the resources and supports that help them thrive. For example, over Thanksgiving and Christmas, we prepared and delivered over 600 meals to seniors, including 100 meals, which were distributed to street homeless seniors who also received blankets and socks along with their meals. Further, we have strived to maintain supportive connections with seniors to ensure their socialization needs are being met. We have collaboratively worked with older individuals to fine-tune our ability to support program offerings in a virtual space. A year ago, we began the process of offering a few classes per week, but now we offer online class. Our online class calendar consists of over 50 health, exercise, arts, culture, and technology programs that older adults can engage in weekly using Zoom or over the telephone. Also, we have worked to establish partnerships with other aging-focused agencies so that we can learn from each other and leverage limited programming and social services resources in a way that potentially will positively impact seniors. As the needs and resources of seniors shift throughout the pandemic, so have our assistance efforts. Our team calls on average 1,500 older individuals per week to check in on them and assist them in navigating their healthcare needs, which now include connecting them to the COVID vaccine. So I'm gonna give it back to David to talk a little bit about needs and gaps.
So I think Maria touched on the one that we identified as the very, very critical, which is access to technology, because that divide is incredibly real and very consequential. It's a citywide phenomena, and it's complicated, multidimensional one that belies a simple solution, but it has to be addressed. Vast numbers of our center members cannot participate in our programming, can't get access to information about COVID-related resources, can't telehealth appointments with their medical providers. So it's a very, very serious problem. Another is that it's the continued access to nutritious meal and food security is a very high priority. The poverty rates for people 65 and above in CB4 are very high. According to a recent American Community survey I looked at, 22% of Clinton's seniors live at or below the poverty line. There's also a need for access to free health and wellness activities. That's a must. These are programs, they're preventative medicine under a different name. And the other thing that we believe is access to culturally competent mental health services. With all of this isolation, with all of this abnormality in terms of routines being broken, mental health challenges that everyone's facing are really prevalent. So it's important. And I raise these things that are sort of like, let's maintain the programs that we have, because DFTA is on the cusp of releasing an RFP that affects the entire system of 240 some odd centers. The RFP is framed as an invitation from DFTA to providers to take the lead in designing their own programs and their own measurements for success. We hope the RFP will provide the latitude to take our programming to where the concentrations of seniors are, like Clinton Towers and Manhattan Plaza. We also hope that there'll be sufficient funds to allow us to continue our core and popular programs as we seek to build our Zoom curriculum and community-based services. But these are worrying fiscal times, so we're worried about preserving as well as that's important, as well as expanding and building new programming to reach people. Thank you.
David, that was excellent. That was 7 minutes. All right.
You practice.
Jeremy, you're up.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'll try to keep it to under 7 minutes. I'm not known for brevity, though. Thanks for inviting us, Maria. It was great to meet you, Joe, and our partners, David and Portia. We work very closely in the neighborhood. Great to see Jose Mercado, our partner at DFTA, and our Chief Operating Officer at Encore, Judith Castillo, who will be co-presenting with me. So my name is Jeremy Kaplan. I'm the Executive Director at Encore Community Services. We are an aging service organization operating up and down the west side of Manhattan. We were founded close to 45 years ago by 2 nuns and a priest, with a lot of help from the theater owners and theater unions in the neighborhood, and have grown since then from preparing and serving less than 50 meals a day just to folks on around the 49th Street vicinity to now almost 500,000 meals a year up and down the west side. Food and nutrition is kind of the heart of our program. Our mission is to improve the quality of life for older New Yorkers. So we do that through food and nutrition. We own and operate two residential buildings in Midtown, an affordable residence and a Section 202 building. And then we have a very robust and lively senior center where before pandemic times, we have hundreds of folks come a day to engage in recreation, food, lunch, and all types of social supports. I just, that Maria asked me to comment on, the gap in food and the need for meals. And so there's an incredible resource for folks who may not be aware called Image NYC. It's an age map. And I can send the link to Maria to share with you guys, and it breaks down all of the demographics for aging, for older New Yorkers in New York City, and it slices it and dices it by neighborhood and services provided. So right before this meeting, I just did a quick search on the number of New Yorkers 65 and over who live alone in CB4, and that number is close to 6,000 older New Yorkers who live alone in CB4, according to the age map. Encore is contracted by DFTA to provide around 1,200 seniors home delivered meals. And that includes seniors from CB4, CB5, and CB7. As you can imagine, I mean, according to age map, I think there's close to 60,000, seniors within those three community districts. And we're only able to serve, quite frankly, just a sliver of those folks. Pre-pandemic, we never had an open spot. We had constant need. Post-pandemic, the need just hit the roof. The day our senior center closed, and David and Portia, I'm sure, experienced the same thing. We literally had, it was like Madison Square Garden, a line wrapped around the block of seniors, many folks who we had never seen before, just scared, panicked, not knowing where they were going to get their next meal. And we did everything we could to get those meals out. And it wasn't just seniors, it was really folks from the entire community. And that those few days, right after the pandemic, before we were ordered to stop grab and go meals, for safety purposes, just really demonstrated the tremendous need in the neighborhood. But I could go on and on. I will take the duty to give you a sense for how our home delivered meals program works, how folks get signed up, and some of the gaps that we see.
Sure. Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you all for inviting us to be part of this conversation, this very important conversation. So as Jeremy alluded to in terms of numbers, I'll just get a little bit more detail. So pre-pandemic, Encore was actually serving around 900 clients through our home delivery meal contract. At the height of the pandemic, that number spiked up to about 1,600 clients. Today, we're serving a little over 1,200 with a little over half of those within CD4. So about 700 of the 1,200 are in CD4. As he said, we are contracted to serve 315,000 units over 260 days through our DFTA contract, but that only covers one meal a day. And these meals are provided 5 days a week, which translates to about 6,000 meals a week. We have the capacity to produce over 1,500 meals a day or 10,000 per week. City Meals also funds the one weekend meal for Saturday and Sunday for us. But again, we're just talking about one meal per day. The way you sign up for the program is through the city's case management agencies. So that's New York Foundation and Self-Help for Our organization. And so they have to be referred through them, and then they'll be signed up on a first come, first served basis. Right now, we have a waiting list that dates back to August because of the cap in our numbers and in our contracted numbers. While we do have the capacity to serve, we do have a cap in our contracted numbers. And what I think what we hear most from our clients is that they appreciate not only the quality of our meals, but also the customer service that we're able to provide them. We have a holistic service portfolio through our wellness team, which includes virtual programming as well that's available to our clients. And also our meal deliverers. They're trained to recognize any physical or cognitive declines in our clients, any changes in their environment, and any in-home hazards that they might see. Something as simple as, the client is taking a little longer to open the door than they normally do. Our meal deliverers are trained to report that back to our administrative program team for appropriate follow-up. And frankly, the quality of our meals. We are known to have one of the best tasting meals in Midtown. So that is something that we hear very, very often from our clients. So, the need is there, as Jeremy alluded to in the numbers in the population. And like he said, we're really only covering a very, very small percentage of those residents in CD4.
Thank you. Committee members, if you have questions, just throw your hands up, please. I did have a question.
JD, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks.
I have a
This was-
comment, but when they're finished, I don't have a question now. I'll wait till they finish.
Katie?
Wait, I'm sorry. Are the presentations not done? Or this is the
Yes,
right time
no.
for questions?
They're done. Time for questions, yes.
Yeah.
Great. So thank you.
Wait, I'm sorry, Katie. Let JD go ahead. He thought it was still continuing. I knew it was over. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Katie, do you mind if I just make a comment? First of all, the work you do is so important. It's the most important work in this community, I feel. I have always felt that I'm on this board to really help the most vulnerable people in our neighborhood. Unfortunately, the board is trying to deal with global issues sometimes. Maria and I and Jessica were able to get funds to make this needs assessment study, because we felt that this is what this board should focus on. So I'm going to say two things. Please come to these meetings. Please work with us. Please push us so we can get you what you need. Secondly, I'm going to ask the committee, and certainly Joe and Maria, let's go and try to get some more funding when it's available, and work with you all, and maybe work with Google to get some help.
And Amazon.
And Amazon for seniors to be able to, so we can cross this digital divide and bring them up to stuff. And I think we could probably work together to get something. So I'm going to suggest that to Maria and Joe and the committee members, that let's get some funding to study this. Let's contact Google and Amazon and try to work out something. Anyway, thanks for all your hard work. You make us proud.
I threw in Amazon because I know they're also now in our district as well as
And
Google.
Facebook now too.
Oh, Facebook also. Oh, good to know. Katie?
Thanks.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
gotta
the
take notes.
information you guys shared was so great. And clearly this is something that we need to help support you on. I had a couple of questions about how we can help support you. And I guess, so one is related to the computers or the digital divide, and one is related to food. So I guess in connection with the digital divide, I know that I'm familiar with a senior center on the Lower East Side where they had a lot of computers and people would come there and be able to socialize with each other and use the computers there. This is obviously pre-pandemic. But I guess, so one question I have about the digital divide is, do you think it would be useful to get computers for people in their homes? Or are you hoping sort of post-pandemic that there would be places that people can gather and use the computers there? So that's one question. And then about the food, I know that you're sort of limited to the contract you have right now or the number of people you can serve. And you said that you have the capacity to make more meals. But like, if you got private funding, would that help you even? Because do you have to, in order to get the people assigned or sort of off the wait list, or the people, does it have to go through DFDA? So anyway, I was wondering about the food, whether or not private funding would be helpful, and then about the computers. Over to you as to who answers what.
I'll about the computers. I mean, previously we have, all of our centers have computer centers, and that was how we attempted to address it. And this is where people could come and they get trained and they have internet access and so forth and so on. What's really needed is, in fact, for people to have smart devices that are hooked to systems in their homes, so that they can, sort of enjoy the wealth of opportunities and options that are out there. So that's what sort of needs to be done. I mean, when the centers open up, we can provide the training to help people use it, but it's the devices at home that are really critical. In terms of private financing, it's always it's fickle, it's unreliable. It tends to be unreliable. We do a sit down dinner for years out of Coffee House, and we've actually basically subsidized it ourselves out of general fundraising from individuals. But I'd love to run it 2 days a week, but it's $25,000-$30,000 to do that a year. It starts to add up. It's just that the private funding is unreliable.
Yeah.
So-
Oh, go ahead, Judy.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
So I
yeah.
want to say that yes, certainly the private funding would help, because the way the funding works through DFTA is that it allows us to pretty much hire as many meal deliverers and drivers as the funding will allow, right? So, it's very mathematical, where it's like, each meal deliverer has to deliver these number of meals within a certain window, and they can only but do so many during that window. So certainly having the opportunity through private funding to increase personnel and in turn produce the additional meals would definitely be helpful for us.
So my thought on that, I echo everything that David and Judy said. To David's point, private money here is tricky because we need to sustain it. So especially if we were going to take on new clients, we become essentially the for lack of a better term, like the family person, right? Become almost like, and oftentimes we are the next of kin for folks that are isolated. So when we form those relationships, we want to keep them for the long haul. But absolutely, private support is always needed for any nonprofit. In terms of what the community board can do to help, volunteers. Desperate's not a great word. We depend on volunteers at Encore and in other home delivered meal programs throughout the city. Because quite frankly, the contracts don't fully cover the costs, and so were it not for volunteers, we would not have the staff to push out those almost 500,000 meals a year. And now with the pandemic, volunteers are hard to come by, because most of our volunteers previously came from corporations, businesses, banks, law firms, whatever that would kind of as a part of their social responsibility would send us folks. That completely stopped. So where we would, previously we would have 30 volunteers a day or more. Now we're lucky if we get 3 or 5, because of the pandemic. So the other thing is food donations help a lot, right? As Judy mentioned, we're funded for 1 meal a day. And so we just got a call from the Sullivan Street Bakery saying, hey, you can come up and pick up 20 bags of bread, every week if you want. And we're like, of course, we're going to do that. And so, food donations allow us to supplement, what we're funded for. The last thing that I'll say, though, and I think is relevant for this conversation, because I know you guys are making decisions about how you want to advocate for the budget, for the city budget. DFTA is the lowest funded city organization, New York City department, as far as I understand. Right, DFTA's funding is less than a fraction of 1% of the city's budget. I believe that's atrocious. I think our budget is a reflection of our values, and by underfunding DFTA to this extent, it just shows that we don't value our seniors in New York City. So DFTA needs more money so that Jose can pay for more for more meals, and I know he wants to do that, because I know every time we call him, he helps us out. So I think it's, this really is about an investment that the city, needs to make in seniors.
So
Thank you.
I think we should note, in general, with not-for-profits, especially ones doing this kind of work, private funding is the icing on a cake. And maybe it's a very thin icing sometimes, right? When you're dealing with this kind of service, it is a government agency that provides the bread and butter, the infrastructure, and gets them the adequate funding and also the reliability. Because the last thing anyone wants in our community is expand a program and have to contract it. And all of a sudden, seniors are sitting there saying, I can't get a meal. One of the things I think our committee can do here tonight in the budget process is recommend an increase for funding specifically, right, on the meal program, but tie it very, very concretely to the pandemic and the fact that the centers are closed, because this is an issue. In the supportive housing I run, Katie, we had all kinds of meals and events, and everything is just stopped. So we're cobbling together all these different services, and like we had a partnership with Avenue School to provide meals at a period of time. They're going to come back again. Who would have thought a wealthy school would give meals to seniors? But it did. The problem is it's cobbled together. So we need to get a steady and regular stream of funding and make this a political issue, because of course the budget itself is horribly tight. And you should hear from David, Cultural Affairs, if you think DFTA is not getting funded. You know what I mean? It's sort of like everybody's getting squeezed at this point in time. You have to be realistic about it. I'd like to bring us back. So I think that's one action we can take tonight. But I'd like to bring us back to the tech issue. I think there's a couple of pieces to that. Yes, we can work with our various tech companies about getting people devices like tablets, things like that. However, you also have to have internet service and Wi-Fi. And this has a cost associated with it. So have you had any thoughts about that, especially for the seniors who are extremely scattered? It's one thing to say you can figure out something in Manhattan Plaza or in Harborview, but what do you do when we're talking about individually scattered folks? So to go to David and Judith or Jeremy to respond to that. Anybody? David's on mute.
Hi.
There.
Yeah, no, I mean, you hit the nail on the head about the complexities that are there. I think there's no really easy answer. The people that we're partnering with right now, Fairstead Affordable, they have a project up in Harlem where they negotiated a deal with Spectrum and basically arranged for 112 apartments to have internet and cable service for $38 a month. So they were able to work at negotiating. They brought customers to Spectrum, and Spectrum, gave them deals. So this may be something that we, now I'm thinking about, I should try that at Woodstock Hotel, and I should look at that as something. So there may be something in NYCHA Harborview that you undertake, an examination as to see how many were, who are what coverage do people have, what are they paying, and could you organize a package deal where people saved a lot of money, which would enable them to perhaps be ready to to take advantage of smartphones that are donated. But that's sort of the that's the thought that comes to my head. It's place-based, working with the landlord, working with the tenants, and negotiating the spectrum. But maybe the city could undertake dialogue with Spectrum to develop packages to sort of shape it so that these things become known.
So just a quick question. That works for buildings that have enough people in a large building to work. How about the individual seniors in the tenements and the walk-ups all over our neighborhood who are not in that ability to be working together? Any thoughts about how to reach them and assist them?
The way I've seen it.
Judith, yeah, Judith.
Sorry. One of the things. Okay.
Oh, Portia, sorry. Either of you, take a choice.
So one of the things that we've been doing with DFTA is calling people. We call people, and we still have people who over the duration of the year, I can say we have a pretty good assessment of who has access to technology and who doesn't. One of the things that we're finding is people have access to technology that they can't use for certain reasons. And so in thinking or might not be formally connected to the sites that we're operating, there's also the need to establish ties with folks that when folks have devices, they can get them serviced. And so we have people who have tablets, they've been donated tablets, don't last forever. And so really putting in the complete system so that people have a link to, we have a tablet, you can afford to have it activated, but then if something breaks or if you need tech support, that's available for you as well.
Judith?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to mention that I do believe that I think it was DFTA had also rolled out a program in connection with NYCHA where they were getting tablets to seniors that really all they had to do was turn them on. It was done like a very simple way where it's like press this button and once this thing turns on, you'll be able to connect to, you know, the virtual programming or whatnot. So I think it's been done. There's definitely studies out there that we can look at to get this rolled out to the masses. But again, because of funding, it was very limited to, I think, maybe 1,000 seniors throughout the city.
So woefully inadequate for the need, obviously. But a question I have for you is the community has worked with the Department of Education with learning labs to try to do the same issue where there are students who don't have access to technology or internet and setting up learning labs around the city so they can go and actually access and go to a place and be socially distant and managed. Is there any reason we can't talk about a similar version of that for seniors so they can somehow connect in? Because also there are people who will leave their homes and are mobile and want to walk around. And is that something that we can discuss? Because we've gotten far along with the learning labs. Now they're on hold for other reasons. But what about that as an idea? Anybody?
I mean, I think it's
Jeremy first, then David. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic idea. Right. I mean, I think we're talking about, farther along into, the next phase, right, of the pandemic. Because, right now there's still a complete moratorium on any congregate gathering for seniors, which, I think many of us in the aging services world, have questions about whether or not that still makes sense. Given the fact that people do leave their homes and they are gathering regardless.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. And when our center was open, we the access to a computer, was a big driver, right? To pull people in. I think this is where there are public-private, partnership opportunities because I believe it is easier to sustain, technology and capital in this way than it would be to, for example, meals or a long-term relationship around meals. But I do want to note that with respect to landlords, I remember, and I just want to say this out loud, that when over the summer, when we were making phone calls to get seniors air conditioners, and I know air conditioners are not computers, they're very different, but when we were making phone calls to get seniors air conditioners, if the senior lived in a building where the landlord required that they sign off on the installation, we had to go to the next person. We weren't even able to consider, installing an air conditioner in a unit where a landlord we weren't even allowed to ask the landlord, will you sign off on this? So I think that there are some serious collaboration issues, that we need to work with so that we are able to access units, and, a landlord's sign off should not be a barrier to getting a senior internet or a computer or an air conditioner or anything, quite frankly.
David?
I was just going to, the point that Jeremy made about the moratorium is, I think there needs to be relaxation of that so that we could, it is possible to socially distance and control people, provide them access to the computer labs, but our hands are tied at this point by by the department working off of instructions from higher ups. But the labs can be used and could address some of the issues that you're talking about.
So maybe there's a policy to be discussed on how they could be used safely in conjunction with the vaccine for the vaccination proceeding. So it's actually thought about in total.
That's right.
That makes sense? Because you have to link them together. You can't expose people, and there's all different kinds of folks who are willing to get vaccinated versus not. Most of the seniors I've worked with, they want to get vaccinated like yesterday. So.
Yeah, that's actually one of the points that our seniors have been bringing up to us around this time, especially given it's tax season and people are used to doing their taxes via technology. And they're like, if I'm vaccinated, can I come and use your computer lab?
I also want to point out Leslie, Hector, and Dolores have their hand up.
Oh, sorry, didn't notice. Go ahead. Leslie.
First, a comment, just to thank both groups. They do fantastic work to the community. Wonderful. Kudos to everyone. Question, when you have the seniors who get the computers, are they volunteers, the people who train them? Or is it part of your staff? Who does the training for the seniors with the computers? Is that handled just by your group or volunteers?
Thanks for asking that question. At least at Encore, I'm not sure, if this is the case at Project Find, but at Encore, we're not necessarily funded for that type of we have limited funding for that type of instruction. So yes, it is largely volunteers. So we have, for example, we have volunteers from UBS and Google, will come or would come, I should say, a couple of times a week and offer technology workshops and training. So yeah, there's limited funding for staff to do that type of thing. But that's so extremely specialized. The funding that we do have for programming, it's hard to funnel it to something as specific as technology training. Mm-hmm. So it's heavily dependent on volunteers for us.
Thank you.
Dolores.
Yeah, and for us, we
sorry.
use staff and volunteers.
You use staff and volunteers, you said, David? I think that's what he said. He broke up a little for me.
So I just do it. I don't think Jessica's on the call, but the budget task force always has as high priorities senior needs, especially around meals. So we are already advocating. Clearly, we need to find other ways to make them even stronger than just our budget process. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about some other things that maybe the board can help. This policy question, if there's things that we can bring people together to talk a little bit about some of the suggestions that Joe made. But in terms of volunteerism, there's plenty of people that for various reasons have had more time to give within our district. I think a great thing would be when you do have volunteer opportunities to send that to our community board office, so that when we send out our monthly notices of events, et cetera, that people are aware, so we can help out in that respect. And then aside from the community board, I just wanted to mention, you talked about, which is very key, sustainable funding. And where you don't have the big companies that are here that can provide volunteerism through their CSR programs, it's possible that you qualify for the Community Reinvestment Act funding, some grants, et cetera, from different organizations. So if you have partnerships with UBS, Google, those other, UBS, so that's financial industries, and other financial industries, might be a place to see if there's funding that can come through them. And additionally, there is a huge trend in this year where people have recognized food insecurity is a problem across the nation. And a lot of donor advised funds have seen an outpouring of money, and coming at times earlier than they usually would draw from might be a good idea to think about connecting with organizations that put together donor advised funds, so that you're one of those choices for people to give to.
So I want to just sort of tie us up together for tonight, because we're coming close to an hour. And so far from tonight, I guess we are very clearly going to be advocating for an increase in the funding for meals being delivered and connecting that very tightly to COVID. We'll have to get from both organizations what you believe your capacity is. So if you can get that to Maria, and we'll incorporate it into a letter. We spoke a lot about technology and the problem of isolated seniors and not being able to access technology. One of the items we'll mention is the idea of seeking to do a bulk deal with our cable providers. And that's something that the board can facilitate a meeting to discuss, but that works for senior buildings, obviously. So the biggest question, and then the biggest question we have is how do we reach people who are isolated and scattered? So first, we talked about the possibility, like the Learning Lab model for Department of Education. Is there a possibility to have a policy discussion on if and when, in concert with vaccinations, can senior centers be partially used in a socially distanced way in order to get people access to technology? We'll ask that and set up a follow-up discussion, ask our district manager to do that with our council member and with DIFTA. And the last thing is the general tech issue. Tech, it's the hardware and the internet and the Wi-Fi. I think we can certainly have the board work with you to set up a meeting with our large technology companies. And who knew that Manhattan Community Board 4 would be the repository of large technology companies, right? So that's who we are now. And we have a lot of people who are in the governmental side who are very interested to make things happen. They're desperate to show they're not just, greedy and horrible. So that's a good thing. And I think we'll put in a letter that we're going to arrange for that. And I want to note for our members, first of all, thank you, DIFTA, for being here and listening to all this. I know you know the issue 10 times more than us. And if you had more money, you would shovel it everyone's direction so they could actually provide more services. But we are at a serious limitation with our city budget. Just for everyone's to remember that our board has been in partnership with both Project Find and Encore Senior Services forever, for over 50 years. And we worked with Aston Glaves at Project Find, who was way back when. And we sat with Sister Lillian and Sister Elizabeth and Father Moore on West 49th Street at St. Malachy's when the organization was first founded. These are two homegrown organizations for us, and we need to show our support for them in a way that is as broad as possible, but that's as specific so we can actually help them deliver more services. Given that, is there a motion for the points of the letter that I noted?
I move that we write a letter
I second.
with statements and that we express, as Leslie said, our great admiration for all the work you do.
And
Second by Dolores.
Second, yep.
So,
but before we vote, Joe, I know Hector, you had your hand up for a while, and James, you just put your hand up. If you can make it as brief as possible, because we have quite a bit more.
it is 7:24, and we're going to be done on this item by 7:25. That means 30 seconds each. Hector, go.
Oh, okay. Hi. I heard a lot of mention of Harborview houses, but nothing about LHLC or Fulton houses. Does your organizations deal that far down, or is that just for Hell's Kitchen vicinity? Because we have Hudson Guild down here, but they're kind of stretched out thin with their resources.
I think Hudson Guild does. I think Hudson Guild operates in Newark.
They do.
LHLC.
They do.
Right.
They do, but I was hoping to maybe try to connect the two and create a partnership somehow.
So Jeremy's organization does all of CB4 and CB7 and one more and 5.
457.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
For me.
I guess. Okay. So maybe I can reach out to you and maybe try to get you and
I can connect you, Hector.
from Hudson Guild. Okay. Wonderful. Okay.
James.
Thanks.
Yeah, briefly, I was just wondering, I noticed we had various electeds here at the meeting. I was just wondering if any of them could comment on the budget shortfall and
we absolutely cannot have them comment because that will be another 15 minutes.
Yeah.
The budget shortfall is crap. We're in big trouble and they're not going to help because we're all pushing against the wind right here, guys. So we should be very realistic that we can do the best that we can. And our function is going to be to support, coordinate, and get some larger companies to help assist in this case. Otherwise, we have another 3 items on our agenda, so I need to cut you off on that and move on. Can you go to a vote on this item, please? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
All present and eligible. Okay, carries unanimously. Thank you so much. And we spent a lot of time on this because it's really important. We thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you. Sorry, Jose, we didn't have you speak much. But I will be in touch with you guys. So we need to bring over. No problem. We need to bring over. It is Lauren Schuster from Assembly.
I am here. Hi,
oh,
everybody.
You are here. Great.
And Burton got brought over already. That's perfect.
Perfect. So we have Burton Phillips. The second item, which is the 421A benefits. So Burton Phillips, State Senator Brad Hoylman's Chief of Staff in Albany is here, and then Lauren Schuster, Chief of Staff for Rosenthal. They're here to discuss legislation to address misleading and fraudulent 421A lease riders. Please educate us. The floor is yours.
And to committee members and presenters, keep it tight to the point. Go ahead, Lauren.
Please and thank you.
I think Burton is going to open us up. Burton,
oh, Burton, go ahead. Sure.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you to everyone for having us here tonight. So this is an issue that Assemblymember Rosenthal in our office wanted to address, and it was an issue raised by constituent Patricia Tarkington, who approached our offices about this. So we've introduced legislation to prohibit landlords from essentially defrauding tenants by giving them false information about the rent regulated status of their units. Specifically, currently under the law in the 421A program, landlords who receive tax benefits are required to provide notice to tenants when the tenants commence or renew a lease that the apartment is subject to deregulation when the tax benefit expires, and they include an estimated date for when that might occur. That's generally a good requirement, right? It's important that tenants have an understanding of when their apartment might lose the rent regulated status so they can plan accordingly. But the problem that we've seen, and I think Lauren's going to go into some more specific examples, is that some landlords will include the notices warning tenants of the impending deregulation, even in instances where the apartment would remain rent regulated after the expiration of the 421A benefits, because the apartment is rent regulated through another program like the inclusionary housing program. So our bill fairly simply just changes the law to restrict landlords from giving the notices to tenants for apartments that will remain subject to rent regulation after the expiration of the 421A benefit. And landlords who willfully provide information they know to be misleading or incorrect under our bill would be punished with a violation, which comes with a fine of up to $1,000 per violation.
So thank you, Burton. And thank you, CB4, for having us here tonight to talk about this legislation. We could debate the merits of the 421A program for a long time. The Assembly member, for the record, is the sponsor of legislation that would repeal the program entirely. It expires next year. But we think because it doesn't create enough affordable housing units that are affordable to the people who need it the most, that the program should be repealed and replaced with something better. But setting that aside, we do see a tremendous amount of fraud. And it's in part because the program is so exceptionally complicated. And it's hard for tenants to understand. And in many cases,
she froze.
For landlords to understand, our legislation would in no way misrepresentation. This is only for willful misrepresentation. So for instance, when a building receives a 421A tax credit, a percentage of the units are required to remain affordable for a certain number of years. And that depends on the year that the building.
Lauren, we are losing you.
It could be for 10, 20, 25 years.
Maybe Lauren needs to turn off her camera.
Yeah, Lauren, either cut the camera or step out and come back. And Burton, can you pick it up for a second? Because
in some cases, oh no. Can you all hear me?
We hear you better now.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know where I lost you, so I will just. Landlords oftentimes misrepresent the time at which the affordability will end. It could end at the moment that the 421A tax credit expires, or it could end a certain number of years after that and it runs with the tenant. That is often misrepresented in riders presented to tenants, and tenants then either end up paying a higher rent as a result, or they leave. We have a building right now in our district, and this is one of many that we're working on, where just that occurred. In addition to that, the landlord misrepresented the existence of the expiration of the 421A tax credit. The building also receives a LIHTC, which is a low income housing tax credit. And so even though the 421A tax credit expired, the units would continue to remain affordable for many, many years after that because of the LIHTC. The landlord misrepresented that. One tenant brought this issue to us. We looked at the leases, and it turns out that there are dozens and dozens and dozens of people who are overpaying on their rent now as a result of this misrepresentation. We also see this arise in cases where a landlord starts to pay property taxes. So with 421A, the property taxes are forgiven, and then after a certain amount of time, they're phased back in. Once they start being phased back in, landlords are allowed to pass down the cost of the property taxes to tenants in the form of a 2.2% increase in their rent. Landlords often misrepresent when that 2.2% can start being charged. If that rider isn't included at the moment when the landlord becomes eligible to collect it, the landlord is not allowed to collect it at all, but they will try to do that. And tenants often overpay. We are seeing cases where tenants are overpaying hundreds of dollars a month as a result of these misrepresentations. And in the building that I was just mentioning before, we have many tenants who left because they thought that their unit was deregulated and unaffordable. They weren't going to be able to afford it. So they upended their entire lives as a result of this misrepresentation. And because the 421A statute has no teeth at this point, for landlords who do this willfully, there is no consequence. And so the legislation very simply just creates a consequence until we have an opportunity to either repeal it or until it expires by itself. And so I know that we want to be tight, so I want to leave time for questions if anybody has any.
JD?
I have one question. The $1,000 fine doesn't seem too much. How about public flogging?
I think Assemblymember Rosenthal would support that. Off the record.
I'm serious. Is that a limit? Because obviously it might not deter that.
So, thank you, JD. That's an interesting point. I think when we first even drafted the bill, we were contemplating making it a misdemeanor. And what we found was trying to advance the bill on the Senate side. There were some concerns that elevating it to that level was overly punitive. So we did have to compromise on that to advance the bill. I do think, we don't want a violation that's so low that it becomes just a cost of doing business. We think $1,000 is enough to avoid this type of behavior. And certainly if this becomes law and we see that people are just pricing it in as a cost of business, we'd be open to
public flogging.
More teeth.
Thank you.
Other committee members on this? Question?
Leslie
Yes, Leslie? Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. A quick question. Do we know how many people may be affected in our area by 421A?
Yes, the community board has a inventory of all housing. We have it.
We do? Okay.
Yeah, you can go on. Yes, there's an inventory on our website.
Is it large or small, or how would you?
It's large.
Really?
Joe, specifically, it's the document, the affordable housing document and presentation. Is that what you're talking about on the website?
No, it's an affordable housing inventory that we're in the process of updating also. But the guts of it, Leslie, are there. Some things might not be entirely complete, but it gives you a good sense.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Katie.
This is a little bit related to the question JD asked. I agree that I think the $1,000 seems very low, but I guess I'm wondering, is it like $1,000 per apartment? Is it $1,000 per like each month that they charge the wrong amount? Like what is the violation that the $1,000 attaches to?
Sure. So the violation is for providing one of these lease notices that has the willfully incorrect or misleading information. So it would be per apartment, but.
Well, no, it's really per instance.
It's per instance. So
per apartment. Yeah.
The riders are required annually. And so in any instance where the rider contains incorrect information that was willfully provided, that would be a $1,000 violation. If you took the building that we're working on in our district currently, it would add up to like tens of thousands of dollars. It just wouldn't be $1,000. If there's a willful violation, it's often with multiple units, not just one.
So can I make a suggestion to you folks on the presenter side? I think it's important that you also give some tools here. One of the problems is there is no regulation of how the riders or the notices are done. And because in this kind of 421A work, there's subsidy layering, LIHTC, 421A, there could be a inclusionary, whatever the hell, there's multiple things, right? If HCR, as part of its toolkit, had standard form letters for notification, no owner could bullshit and say, I didn't know what I was doing. Because the issue here you have is willfulness. And in some cases, that's going to be hard to prove when someone says, I didn't get it, or I made a mistake, even though we know it was done on purpose. By having something that is a standard letter, there's no question. Like, Lauren, this is a LIHTC unit, and here is placed in service, here's how long it's affordable, here's when it expires, and that's part of your normal notification. Or you're in a unit that is 421A and inclusionary, there is no expiration of, I think mandating some specificity is going to help the process, because that people will contest violations, right?
Joe, your point is so exceptionally well taken. We actually had a meeting yesterday with a number of tenants and housing advocates about this legislation, and they suggested that we standardize the riders on all of the programs. And so I think having something standard makes sure that landlords who are trying to comply don't get caught up in this, and it gives nobody an excuse. Then there's no reason not to comply. So that is a point well taken. And I think Burton and I need to have a conversation off the record to talk about a little tweak to the bill.
And I would say, again, that should live in HCR, because they're the ones who are charged. 421A flows from there, right? It's part of the private housing finance law. So let's put it in there. Other questions or specifics? The issue here is we're looking for support of the bill, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Betty?
Maria. Oh, Betty. Betty had a question?
Oh God, I hope she.
Okay. I was wondering, if a person lives in one of these sorts of buildings, what advice would you give them for asking what they should do to try to understand whether they have got the right landlord form or advice, rider? What should people do?
That's a very good question, Betty. For us, we would say, come to our office. We help tenants with this all the time. The sad story is that for every tenant that comes to us because they have the sinking suspicion that something is wrong with their lease, there are hundreds, if not thousands, other who do not, and they overpay or leave their home. So if there is somebody that in this situation, tell them to come to us, to Senator Hoylman's office. We'll help them make heads or tails of it. It is often not easy for an individual tenant to figure out on their own.
Or also housing conservation coordinators works throughout the district in order to give assistance to tenants in this. That's how we discover this a lot, because somebody randomly goes in or calls somebody and you find out it's a whole building with a mess like this.
Thank you.
So any other discussion, anybody? So JD?
JD?
I move we write a letter thanking Burton and Lauren for this presentation and that we do support this bill. And I would add Joe's recommendation about a standardized form to be considered.
Thank you.
Second on the motion? Second from James. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Martin Treat. Thank you all so much very much.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
Wait a minute, Joe, am I like present not eligible because I live in a Fort?
No,
Okay.
you have no conflict whatsoever.
Okay, great.
You have no personal benefit coming from 421A. Trust me.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you.
Got Martin laughing on that.
Thank you, Burton, so much for being here, and Lauren as well. Maya and Emily, good to see you.
Thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Next on the
So-
agenda.
Yes, so I want to frame, this is the beginning part of a discussion, and I want to make sure that people understand there are two separate items happening. And the committee was sent information just to give you a big picture, but our committee from Housing, Health, and Human Services is only considering one item. This is the issue about it really is the broad issue of the use of hotels that are now not functioning or at 30% occupancy, and also on the land use side, which we will not be considering, the conversion of Class B and C office space into residential use. And the residential use could be for market rate housing, affordable housing, supportive housing, or social service use. Our committee the majority of that is under the governor's bill, which was sent to you in the Dropbox, but that is not our charge. That is being considered by the Land Use Committee. Our charge is the city's initiative to acquire hotels for some sort of affordable housing or supportive housing use. And the affordable housing could have a mixture of market and also affordable housing. We don't know. It's a nascent idea that's starting to happen. So to that end, we've been working in the neighborhood to come up with a map to give an idea of what is the opportunity here. There have been many people who said this is a great idea. All of us believe that the idea of acquiring hotels that are not working for affordable housing and supportive housing or homeless services is in concept a great idea. But as we've learned with the homeless shelters, execution matters and how things are located and where they are. I want to give people a quick overview, and it'll make your eyes fall out of your head of how many hotels we have in our district. And I'm going to ask Nellie to put up the map that is the Google map first. Is Nellie not? Here she is. Yeah. Nellie, with us?
Yes, I'm here. I'm just pulling up the document.
Just wanted to make sure you hadn't slipped away, that's all.
No, I'm here. Don't worry.
If you can zoom in a little bit. And then drag it over. Yeah, there we go. So pull out a little bit, a little more. So we're now looking at our district, and this is actually, you're seeing the bottom part, which is Chelsea. So Nellie, pull it down on the screen so we can see the top part, which is Hell's Kitchen. All of these Google map points are a hotel in our district. So just imagine that for a moment. If all of these were converted to affordable housing and or supportive housing and or homeless services. So this is a huge, huge issue. This is a beginning attempt to gather information. And now let's go to the next map, which is a little more detailed, which is the one we're working on developing. This one is block and lot based. This gives you a much better picture. And if you can zoom in. So let's stay with just the garment district for a second to give you some rough, the data is raw. These are drafts. These are not final. In the garment center bid, there are currently 11,415 hotel rooms. So that is a huge number. But our job now is to move this map from points, little dots, to actual block and lots and numbers. So then we would have on every single location, here's how many rooms exist. Get an idea of what we're talking about in terms of the scale. It looks like both the governor's legislation, proposed legislation, and the city's initiative will affect our community board well disproportionately than any other location. So what I want to do, and pull it down, Betty, so we can, Nellie, so I can see the top. Yeah, great. And then we have the whole part of Chelsea that has a pile of hotels too. So I think we can lose the map for a second. I want to just have some discussion about this because we need to take an initial position as opposed to detailed one. First, just the reaction from some folks. Is this how many hotels you expected, or do we have more than you thought? So let's get some sense of it. Katie?
So I knew we had a lot of hotels. I guess where I'm confused, but I haven't read the proposed legislation, so I'm ignorant. No one's proposing that all hotels be turned into affordable housing or anything else, right? I mean, isn't this about that? I'm trying to understand where we're coming in. Isn't this about that they're saying that some hotels might be purchasable or obtainable in some way for affordable housing or homeless services? And we want to say, when those decisions are being made, we just want people to think about not having them all clumped together on the same block or two. Is that it? Because we're not going to try and choose by looking at all the different hotels, like which one should be sold.
No, a little broader. The state and the governor's side is about zoning waivers and multiple dwelling law changes to enable hotels of less than 150 rooms currently, or Class B and C office buildings, to be converted to residential use and not be subject to basic requirements of the multiple dwelling law. That's one piece, and land use and zoning committees will deal with that. Not applying to that whatsoever is the city's initiative to acquire hotels to be converted to affordable housing, supportive housing, or homeless facilities. That is not subject to those same guidelines or whatever. So in fact, if the city funded a for-profit or not-for-profit group, they could acquire a 400-room hotel and convert it to affordable housing, supportive housing, or homeless services. So the problem with understanding this is that they're related, but they're not entirely intertwined. So there's two separate things happening in terms of the policy part. And it's not like everything goes, but let's face it, if this is solely opportunity-based, our district will be the place that it lands because we have the most opportunity. Jessica?
Yeah, I just wanted to, the point you just made is helpful, that the percentage, because we have so many hotels in our district, if this happens 10 times, it will happen most likely in our district.
Bingo.
So I appreciate that, that framing, but I do want to note that my understanding is that very few hotels, despite what it seems, because you can walk by hotels and see boarded up hotels, that very few hotels actually are facing foreclosure and or are looking to sell. And so while
they are on the market. As a affordable housing provider, I am getting calls every week from brokers wanting to sell hotels. It is shocking.
Okay, but I'd love to learn more, hear more about those examples. It just so happens my husband works in real estate, and from at least the big hotels, he's saying that they're not seeing that at all. So maybe it's a distinction between size and scope, and that would be helpful to also unpack that, because we just acknowledge that there are 150-person hotels versus 400, and obviously that is a very different kind of opportunity and footprint. But yeah, I'd love to.
I actually think that. I don't think this is going to affect the larger scale things, but it's the mid-range and the budget ones that are smaller, under 300 to 50 units. Those are the ones that seem to be in a death spiral mode right now.
Okay.
Yes, Pete.
Doesn't that apply to construction prior to 1977? Or am I, do I have this wrong? Any hotels that are built prior to a certain time in history?
No, Pete. Remember, there are two separate initiatives here. There is the multiple dwelling law one, which is the governor's. But then there's the city initiative that we're talking about tonight. That has no regulations about hotels and times and whatever. It is about using city capital funds to acquire hotels to convert to housing or homeless facilities.
Okay.
Yes, Betty, and then Josephine.
Okay, so I'm so happy that you got these maps going, and then they're going to be keyed to the number of rooms that they have. Did you say that, Joe? Each one's
Yes.
going to have that. So I think the direction, if we can, is the community board should develop our guidelines in terms of the geography and other criteria for repurposing the hotels to other kinds of supportive housing or affordable housing. I mean, it could, unfortunately, it'd be kind of a really heavy duty, heavy maintenance project. And I don't know if we need to get more staff or something to do it. But I just think that we shouldn't wait for the city to just say, okay, we're putting another one here and another one there. You know, I think we should have guidelines, and we should also make a big stink about the process, about our review of the decision making. So I think we really need to do something.
Josephine?
Basically, just following up with what Jessica had said earlier, I know this is going to be a lot of work to pull these numbers together, but it would really be helpful to know, you know, approximately how many of these buildings and these hotels are up for sale or could possibly be converted, right? Because the math is just breathtaking. So, you know, it would be nice to have some numbers, and I know that that's hard to follow because, you know, something that might not be for sale today will be for sale tomorrow, but it would be helpful to know in conversations going forward. Thanks.
So I think we're not going to be able to let you know what for sale or not, but at least we'll be able to know the stock, and that gives us a better idea of what is likely to be traded or in the market. And I mean, I really have seen, Jessica, like the small ones, the 50 and 80 units, those are the ones that are really being promoted now to be sold because they're just not profitable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Other thoughts? Yes, JD, and then Leslie, and then James.
First of all, great work. This is really very helpful. Like Betty said, just one question, since this would be a city initiative about fair share throughout the city. That is some general thing we can think about, not against supportive housing or shelters or residential, but for a fair share for our community.
Leslie, then James.
Yeah, question, are we going to be able to get a seat at the table up front for these discussions? I think that's what we should be fighting for, so that if they do go into supportive housing and whatever, that those, pardon the expression, poverty pimps who run these organizations, who are really not servicing the people properly, nor the community, that we have some say in that.
I think part of it is if we take a proactive stance here and say our general policy guidelines, and as we gather more information, it helps put out a beginning of a marker that our community should be involved and participatory in this, as opposed to somebody comes up with something and then we're in the reactive mode. We want to avoid being in reaction all the time.
Well, part of the problem is some of these organizations, they're not trained. I mean, you know, one organization that we've been talking about, and they're not trained to do the job that they're doing, so they're not supporting the people that they pretend to support. Right.
James?
First a question and then maybe a recommendation, depending on the answer to the question. Is the thing we're discussing and debating the idea of the city purchasing these hotels outright, or
no? So our charge is the city's initiative to provide funding for the private sector, whether for-profit or not-for-profit, to purchase hotels to convert them to housing /affordable or supportive or homeless shelters. That is on the land use side is the governor's bill.
So I guess my concern, with any of these kinds of deals, if a hotel, a lot of hotels are hurting, and I understand that developers are people too. But at the same time, I'd be a little concerned with the use of city funds to benefit a private developer, where those monies could possibly go to direct services or improving the services we have.
These are two separate pots. This is capital budget money that cannot be used for services. It's for acquisition through HPD or Department of Homeless Services. So it's only capital budget money for renovation, for acquisition and renovation, not for services.
Is there any thought? And again, I don't have a dog in the fight. Is there any thought to, rather than making it public or private or nonprofit, just making it nonprofit?
We can make any recommendation we want, and that's why we're starting this discussion tonight to get out some initial policy thoughts.
Yeah, and I would just throw that out there as something to consider, because of partly what Leslie said, and also just in general, these distressed hotels, some of them are going to go into full-on foreclosure, at which time they'll be REO'd by the bank, and then it'd be a much better deal anyway. So, to finance something that's bailing somebody out, I just see a lot of issues with that.
But again, I want to note, we need to walk away from the idea of bailing anything out. This is looked at as an opportunity to create affordable housing, supportive housing. And yes, there's always some winner in that in the case of an economic downturn, but that's sort of like the reality. Jessica.
Yeah, for those who don't know, I work in nonprofit. We actually also run affordable housing, not my portfolio, but we do. I think it's helpful to consider nonprofits and giving benefit, opportunity to them. But that alone is not enough to ensure that a facility is well run, as we've seen across the city. And so if we do, I would love to give preferential treatment to that, so that profits are not the motive. But to really be effective, we need to be more specific about selecting groups that have demonstrated success in this area, ability, et cetera.
Qualified, demonstrated record, that kind of stuff. Use those kind of words in that, right? Because we don't want to get into 51st Street again. That's not where we want to be.
Right.
Maria, you haven't weighed in. Oh, Katie, sorry.
No, it's okay. Maria, go first.
Maria? Her camera's off. She might be.
I have tea in my hand. Just give me 1 minute. Katie, you go first.
Gotcha. All right. So I was just wondering if one of the things we could do, I think clearly, as you said, we want to be proactive, not reactive. We want to have a seat at the table. And I'm just wondering if, when we come up with some of the guidelines or some of the things we want to think about, if one of the suggestions could be, can we think sort of percentage wise that if some buildings are going to be built or obtained and converted in this way, could it be like, we recommend that not more than 10% of the total units on a block be obtained, or 20%, whatever the percentage is that we agree to. Because we know certainly that one of the issues that's come up is that when it seems like there is a concentration in one particular block, that can lead to some concerns of other neighbors. So anyway, that's just one thought, is to go by a percentage of the units on a block.
So in other words, just put something in there about developing percentage guidelines in relation to the context of the building, right? Yes, Maria.
I was just thinking, I was actually thinking something along the lines of what Katie just shared. I'm glad that we have the maps, because I think it's helpful for people who are really visual and really to understand.
Draft, remember, they're in draft, they're not final.
Yeah, I know. I saw that some of them, we still need numbers for some of the hotels. The other thing, I really believe that this is important because of that issue about concentration and thinking about context of specific blocks. The other thing is the fact that, and kind of just tying it into the item we had earlier when we're thinking about seniors. Obviously, my personal preference is going to be that there be some supportive housing, specifically, I'm thinking about seniors, I'm thinking about families. But I think the thing that CB4 does, which I think is great and really helpful, is that there's a balance and things are mixed. Having, not a supportive housing building that has, 100 folks that are seriously and persistently mentally ill. But I also think, like others have shared here, it depends who the provider is. I'm just basically repeating everything everyone else is saying.
But I think it's important to say that if it's a social service use, it should be a mixed population, right?
Yeah.
Remember, because we're going to do general stuff tonight, not specifics. We're not there yet. Okay. Anything else along those lines before we go to the public? Okay, then I see one raised hand. Nellie, can you bring him in?
There's two, Brian.
Okay.
Yes.
Bring Brian in first, and the next one.
Brian?
Brian Weber, yes, you're on.
Hey, I just got brought over.
Yeah.
Two things. I just want to give you some numbers on the hotels. And then I just want to make a comment on a few of the commenters. There are approximately 700 hotels in New York City. And as of now, 200 of those hotels have permanently closed. 47% of hotels are 150 rooms or less in New York City. And almost 60 hotels are currently in arrears on their taxes. So the situation is actually dire for hotels. So it does present quite a bit of opportunity. I really liked what Betty had said about forming a criteria. And I think the board is already starting to address that. But one thing to bear in mind, as Joe pointed out, the Garment District alone has 11,000 rooms. If we hypothetically say no more than 10% could go to supportive housing, that's still 1,000 rooms of supportive housing in a concentrated district. So I think we have to think of the criteria in different terms, in terms of the geography and in terms of how many units are in a block. My block alone has over 1,000 hotel rooms. So that's something to take into consideration. The other thing is Leslie had said something very important, which I think is a seat at the table. And I think that's really what this is about. And Joe also said it is, we want to be in a place where we're not reactive, where we're not responding to the city's acquired this hotel and that hotel, and they're turning it into a shelter and they're putting supportive housing right next door. So I love the idea that the board is taking a proactive stance on this. And I just want to kind of support you in your endeavors to do so.
Thank you. Next is Anna. Is that who it is? Nellie?
Yes, Anne.
Anne. Anne, go ahead. Anne Santor. What are the instructions? It might be on phone. Maria, what is it? Star what?
Star 6 to unmute if she is on the phone, but I don't think she is.
She is unmuted.
Yeah, Anne, we can't hear you. Oh, now you've muted. Try to unmute again. Can you unmute her?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, there you go.
There. Hi, Anne.
Hi, nice to see you all again. I want to make two just brief comments. I work in the theater. I work at Lincoln Center, and the health of the city is dependent on Broadway returning. And the health of Broadway returning is dependent on the hotels where all the tourists will stay while they go to dinner somewhere and then go to shows. And there's nobody involved in these discussions who represents the health of this industry. So that concerns me, and I wonder if it's possible to reach out to I'm sure you know the Broadway League or whatever, just because all of these, if many places are turned into shelters, it's going to be a real drag on that industry when they come back.
I don't think there's any advocacy to turn everything to a shelter. The city's city's initiative is combination of affordable housing, of supportive housing, and or shelter. And I think our neighborhood is very clear about the density of shelters, and that's a big issue for us, right? So I think it's a very good idea, though, to bring this up to get a broader range of people involved.
And I misspoke. I mean, I just think, because I'm live on 36th Street, that's the word that comes out of my mouth. But if you look at the total number of hotel rooms, and Brian's statistics were helpful, how many does the industry need to recover successfully? We need to think about that. And if those are turned into whatever they're turned into, then the industry isn't coming back because nobody can stay anywhere. The second thing is, because this has happened to us, courtesy of our representatives, and we have been the recipients of all, pretty much the bulk of the temporary shelters, we now have become the focus of this issue. So as you're making your map, I wonder if that map could include the East Side, Brooklyn. I mean, why are we the sole focus now of all the housing issues moving forward? Why isn't the Upper West Side? Why isn't the Upper East Side? Why, I mean, just the map's going to be helpful, believe me, but there's other parts of Manhattan and Brooklyn that could share in this as well. And should we not point that out, that since we've been the focus of it, do we have to stay the focus of it?
I think we are definitely, our charge is Manhattan Community Ward 4, Hell's Kitchen, Hudson Yards, Chelsea. So we have to focus on that, and a little bit of the Garment Center, because we're trying to assist everybody in this. But it's clear that anything we say, that this initiative, we should say up front, should be looked at citywide, not just in this location. I think that's an important point to add to you.
Is that happening? Do you know?
As always, Manhattan Community Board 4 is the place that the fire starts, and then we figure out how to get the extinguisher to control it. So,
okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Other comments, questions?
Are there any, I think Joe just dropped off. Hello? Can you all hear me? Okay. So he was asking if there are any other comments or questions. Oh, hi, welcome back, Joe, and you're on mute.
I was just told by Zoom I got promoted to a panelist. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about that.
So let me just do a quick recap.
Wait a minute, I was just asking if anyone had any other questions or comments. I don't know if anybody raised their hand or responded or, nope, okay, we're good. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, so recap. So in general, I think we want to say in concept, support the idea of the city providing funding to acquire hotels for affordable housing, for supportive housing, and and social services. We want to note that, I was going to note that we regulate sidewalk cafes and liquor licenses, and we have guidelines for that in our board. We should do the same for this, because it's a much bigger issue. There should be fair share involved when it comes to social services, fair share guidelines, meaning as per the city charter. That there should be a preference for not-for-profits, but not qualified not-for-profits with a demonstrated track record. Katie noted there should be we develop guidelines for percentage of use in the context of uses on the block on the blocks that exist already. I'm going to say that we should have mixed populations, so it should not just be one flavor of housing, that senior housing with family housing or supportive housing mixed together. And that we should also note something we haven't said so far. It should be for a range of incomes if it's affordable housing. It should not just be only the lowest income housing or the highest income housing, but the full range our board always advocates for. So whatever is happening here, there is an ability to create a true community as opposed to separating people into different spots. So given that's an initial sort of thought to put out to the city of New York, and then we'll come back next month with more details and think about how we can refine those broad policy ideas into specific recommendations.
Joe, what was the very first thing you said for this letter? I missed the
Develop-
very first thing.
Develop broad policy guidelines.
Thank you.
So, thoughts?
I make a, oh,
Oh, so-
I was
Go
gonna
ahead.
say, I make a motion.
Is there a second? Second, a lot of seconds. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Great. Okay. This is fantastic. And we're now to our last item, which is the returning of the Hknc letter, support letter to the committee. And I guess I will turn this over to either Betty or Katie.
Yeah, okay, I can do that.
Okay.
Let me just get my hand. My hand went away, good. Okay. As you recall, the last letter that went to the full board was drafted after the last committee meeting, and that did not go over well at all. So mostly Katie and with me and Jessica, we've and in consultation with Maria and Joe, have crafted a new letter, which is simpler and more focused on the organization, the coalition, and the focus on public safety. That letter is in your Dropbox, and I hope you've been able to take a good look at it. And we're going to try very hard to whatever the consensus is, to be very clear on what the vote is tonight, since we were a little muddy last time, and I take responsibility for that. Do you want to, Katie, do you want to say some other words about this?
No, I'm not sure what would be most helpful to people. Should we sort of run through the two main points of the letter? Would that be helpful?
Yes.
Is it possible that the letter could go up on the screen? I don't know. I can't do that, but.
Yes, Betty, I can. Hold on one second.
Great. While that's getting pulled up, I can go ahead and just give a little overview. So the letter right now is directed towards the electeds and basically has two asks. Or it's sort of an ask and a indication of support. So here comes the letter. As you can see, as I mentioned, it's addressed to the electeds, and it's saying basically that we are asking the electeds to call for a meeting of all stakeholders to address public safety issues in Hell's Kitchen. And we're writing them to express our support for Hknc's focus on public safety. And basically, we're suggesting as part of this letter that that a meeting should be pulled together of key stakeholders. And in the second paragraph, you can see that we identify key stakeholders as representatives from Midtown North Precinct, DHS, and Hknc and us. And then we iterate there that we think Hknc should be included as a stakeholder because they represent so many neighborhood constituents. And then the next paragraph just explains, obviously, as we all know, at these HHHS committee meetings, as well as at our full board meetings, we've been hearing from a lot of people in our neighborhood about the kinds of problems they've been having, safety problems, and that public safety has really become a real challenge. And then in the next paragraph, we talk about how Hknc was formed to address some of these very issues. And then we just express support and say, look, we know that work has already been done, but we think that more needs to be done and that we can all work together in a collaborative way, and that we encourage them again to pull together a meeting of key stakeholders. And again, we know that Hknc itself is also pushing for, or actually had a meeting with electeds, but now what we're saying is that there should be a meeting with, several of us including, by the way, the police precinct, as I said, DHS, just get everybody around the table so that we can make sure that we're working together to sort of identify ways that we can collaborate to make our community feel safer. And
Thank you,
that's
Katie.
in a nutshell.
That's great. That's great. And for some people who may not have been here for the last meeting, I'm facilitating the discussion because Joe and Maria are part of the organization, so they wouldn't be appropriate to be leading that discussion. So I'm going to do my best to call on people as you raise your hand. I see JD.
Yeah, I have no problem with the letter, Katie, except maybe mention also Midtown South and the 13th. You only mentioned Midtown North.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, so you're suggesting that we sort of include all of the police precincts and not just,
well,
this letter is sort of focused on Hell's Kitchen specifically, which is sort of Midtown North, but.
Oh, it's up to you. I
Okay.
thought it was a broader thing because Midtown South is like 36th Street and all those different things, but that's up to you all.
Okay.
But I just want to be obnoxious here and.
Must you?
Yes, I must.
Damn.
Why are we going through this again with the community board?
JD, the letter was referred back to committee by the community board. That's what
Let me
happens.
finish, Joe. Let me finish. I'm just worried that we're going to get the same attack. And I'm just asking, is it a good idea to put ourselves up again?
I'm going to speak as straight parliamentary stuff. This letter went to the board, is referred back to committee. That's the proper place to consider it. And then the committee decides what to do and sends it back to the full board. That's the board's procedure, and we cannot really deviate from that.
Okay, but you understand what I'm raising. I'm concerned that we all get these attacks. Anyway.
Okay. Thanks. All right. I see Hector's hand up. Hector?
Just a quick thing. I mean, since it was mentioned about the other precincts, you might want to add PSA4 in that as well, because even though they're not in the community board for, they do service the area because of the two housing developments.
Could you say that again a little louder?
Since it was mentioned about the other precincts, you may want to add PSA4 to that list as well, because they are involved in the community policing. Okay.
Thank you, Hector.
Thanks. All right, thank you.
Josephine?
I'd like to see other stakeholders at the table as well, including the Coalition of the Homeless, right? Because they will advocate for the homeless people who are faced with housing discrimination. There's a huge mental illness crisis happening. And I would like to see that they need to also have a seat at the table, right? To make sure that the homeless people who are not causing any issues are not going to be further harassed by the police because they're Black or Latino or because they're poor. So this is not an attack at all. It is just, we're trying to look out for everyone here. And these are our most vulnerable New Yorkers. They are homeless. This is probably the biggest social crisis issue of our time. And our own Social Justice Committee has not even touched this. So that's another discussion to have, and maybe there's something that we can do there on this issue. But I feel like the issue of public safety can never really be resolved if some of these underlying issues are not resolved. Why aren't these landlords taking housing vouchers? This is a problem that continues to go on, and we're not really getting to the bottom of it. So if we're going to invite this group to be a part of it, that's fine. But we also need to have other stakeholders there as well that are really looking out for these neighbors. And, my issue is not with this group completely, but when I go back and I read some of the language from the other letter, when we talk about clear and present danger, that's the kind of language to me that it's inflammatory to the majority of the people who are faced with homelessness and are not causing any issues at all. I'd also like to see some percentages, right, of what, how many people in these shelters have actually received summons or been arrested? What is, what's really going on here? Can we see some numbers? And this is not to invalidate people's experiences, because these experiences are real, right? I'm surrounded by homeless shelters myself, one just down the block. So it's not like I don't understand, or that I'm saying or invalidating people's experiences. But what I am trying to say, that this is a huge social justice issue. There are lots of good people on this board. We talk about creating affordable housing all the time. The problem is that affordable housing is not, discrimination is happening every day. So the people who need the affordable housing are actually not getting it. So what can we do as a board to advocate on the behalf of people who are not getting housing that actually need it? That's
Okay, I think I got Coalition for the Homeless to add as a key stakeholder.
And also mental illness, Betty, if you can, because as we know, DHS has not, they've not really shown leadership on this issue. And we know that, especially during a time of COVID, it is a crisis in this city, right? We had a mother in one of my family shelters who killed her own child 2 weeks ago. Crisis. And we are not seeing the level of commitment. And so one of the things that I'm actually working on right now with Corey Johnson's office is trying to work with Fordham University and Pace University to use students in their social worker programs, advanced students, and placing them in the shelter system. Because what I don't want to hear again is we go back to DHS with another letter asking for more support, and we get the same thing happens, which is basically nothing. So I would like, to enlist this board's help, especially our Social Justice Working Committee, on how are we going to come up with creative ideas to really get to the root and try to help some of these people. So we're not just, moving bodies around and writing letters, and then DHS is not really helping us. It's like we keep doing the same thing over again and we're not getting different results. So that's one of the things that I'm working on right now in terms of mental illness. So that's what I would just like to see. I would like to see that incorporated into the letter. The Coalition for the Homeless, a lawyer for them that's going to advocate on behalf of the homeless, but also someone from the mental health community that understands the trauma of homelessness, what's happening here. And so we are really putting DHS, they've got to do something. And if they don't do something, then we have to get help from somewhere else. Thank you.
Got it. I wrote it down. Okay. I see Dolores has had her hand up for a while.
So we're just making the case in point of why this is, why this letter, initial letter, and this letter is failing. The group that had gathered together were people of block associations, social service agencies, local businesses, and some of the religious facilities within our district. What was being expressed was concerns and the hope to bring together as many stakeholders as possible to think about how to do this. What we're now doing in this committee, and what we did at the full board, is we're imposing our ideas, our well-intentioned ideas of how we want to solve the big problem. Hknc is working on very specific local issues without being prescriptive. Again, it's been trying to get all of the people together that can start the process of figuring out what to do. The reason why this has happened is because we have not had the support of most of our local electeds. In normal times, our local electeds are in lockstep with us and working on these bigger problems. Hknc formed because we were not seeing that action. The board has been writing letters, you're right, Josephine, and we're not seeing action. But what we're adding to this conversation is not what Hknc came to this committee to speak about. What it was looking for is support for bringing these different groups together to start a conversation. And what we're adding to the letter are our bigger issues that we're trying to deal with as an overall society. And that is something that we can't solve, but we can try to work towards it. But if we add all these things to the letter, it is not what Hknc came to this committee to ask for. It was support for getting in front of our electeds and also bringing in NYPD, who's been shut out of the conversation, on how they can help. So
Dolores, let me see, because I want to be clear on what people are saying, is I understand that you don't want to add like all kinds of organizations and so on. Is that mean if they weren't added and the letter that is as it stands now, you're comfortable with or you're uncomfortable with?
I actually agree with JD. I know it was sent back to committee, but again, a part of what has happened was the conversation that happened at full board has really poisoned what the request was from a group of our neighbors, of the community, coming to us and saying, hey, we haven't had any success through our normal channels, which is the community board writing letters. We're now trying to find another way to bring everybody together and figure this out. Not stigmatizing, not being prescriptive, not trying to say we know what the answer is, but just trying to bring people to the table. I'm thinking that we have too much bad history with the previous letter, and that is causing a problem with how we're expressing what Hknc had come to this board to do. I have to disclose that I can't vote on it. I do participate with Hknc. And I just wanted to express that because I am concerned about how we're putting together the things that we really need to work on as an overall society into this request from a community organization.
Can I just ask a question of you, Dolores, about that? Can you give me an example? Because I'm just having a hard time because right now the letter, all it's doing is asking for a meeting of stakeholders and saying we support Hknc's public safety focus. So I'm not clear when you say we're being prescriptive now. I mean, I guess we're being prescriptive as to who we think some of the key stakeholders are, but can you, I'm not sure what to take out that's prescriptive because I don't see it.
Can I jump in for a sec?
Well, why don't we, Joe's been waving his hand for a while.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to ask all the members of the committee and the public, the letter that was issued at our last board meeting was not consistent with the requests from the Hell's Kitchen Neighborhood Coalition. And I would ask all the committee members to just let it go because it was incorrect. It's not what we asked for. And it was very inflammatory. And I agree with you, Josephine. It's not what was asked for. And the fact that people are relying back on it is just should come off the table once and for all. Thank you. Second, our board cannot solve major societal problems. We can address them, we can engage with them, we can figure out, but our job is on a local level, how to get from point A to point B. And our board has been so incredibly successful in that. I want to note that when we brought in a discussion I work with advocates all the time. This is not an advocacy issue. This is a public safety issue in our streets. And normally what would happen is that we would have our elected officials working with the various city agencies, forcing DHS, for example, to act responsibly. The biggest problem, one of the biggest problems we have here is that the providers have contracts and DHS is not at all holding them accountable. So therefore, there's a general mess. And then we have all the societal things that have come around it. I mean, we are not going to be able to change how horribly DHS has managed its response to COVID. And then we're not going to be able to change all the things that happened in the last year and how the police have responded to things. And so it all gets to be a mishmash, right? The goal to accomplish and achieve anything in our neighborhood is to be specific, limited, and clear. I don't believe by bringing in mental health advocates or homeless advocates, we're going to resolve anything because they are there to advocate. That's their role. That's what should happen. 100%, right? We're talking about public safety on our streets and how everything is being approached and not coordinated. It is not about how do we solve the fact that owners are not accepting Section 8 vouchers. How do we solve the fact that there's not enough affordable housing? I run affordable housing. There is no discrimination in our affordable housing. Some people do, but not in our district. It's not the case. The majority of people who live in affordable housing in our district are people of color. That's a fact. That's a hard fact. So when people bring their lens in to say, and there's this problem and that problem and all of these, we dilute the focus. So our focus is flat out, the request is this letter, I support this letter as written with not bringing in more stakeholders because it's a simple request saying everyone sit down and come and collaborate. And the fact that we're having a dispute about it says to me that I believe partially the board has lost its way. It's a problem solver. Our board's successful because we're a problem solving board. We're not going to solve everything at once. We have to have, underneath our problem solving, it's got to be a credible amount of philosophy and thought. But we are not going to solve the citywide homeless crisis and how badly it functions in this letter or any action we may take.
And I'm not asking you to do that. It was a simple request to have two other people at the table. You just said, let's invite everybody to the table. I'm not asking to invite everyone. It was a simple request, two other agencies to the table. That's all I was asking.
You asked to invite an advocate.
No one's expecting you, Joe, to solve the homeless crisis and racism and everything else. Nobody's asking that. That would be ridiculous for me to ask. And if any but one, I have not lost my way. Okay. I feel that as
I said the
a
board,
community, I said, I feel as a community in terms of homelessness in general, in this city, we've lost our way. The people who are getting murdered in the subway are other homeless people murdering other homeless people. That's why when you talk in terms of public safety, it's important that somebody is also talking about the public safety of homeless people. And the police are going to do that. And as far as I know, this other group is not going to do that. That is why I asked that. It was a very simple request.
What other group is not going to do that?
The group that wrote this letter, the original letter, the HK whatever group.
No one wrote. That's the point. The original letter
I know
was
it's not the
written
point.
by
The point is for public safety to add more police. I know what the point is. That's the point.
No, it's not. No, it's actually not.
How else are you going to get public safety if it's not
It is
adding more
not
police?
it. I'm sorry. This is what gets me crazy here is some of us walk in the room with a preconception as to
No, that's not true, Joe. Please don't accuse me of doing that.
I'm sorry.
I'm an
that's
intelligent
exactly what's
person.
happening.
I'm
And
not
we're now in
going
an
to
argument
allow.
phase.
I'm not
I'm
going to
gonna
allow
interject.
anyone to
Betty, you
disrespect
got
me
it.
in that way and say that I've come in with
Betty, you can
preconceived
interject.
notions or a knee-jerk reaction, because it's not. All of my thoughts are very well informed. I've been working on these issues for years. So please do not, I would never do that to you, Joe. I would always give you the respect of not doing that to you. And I would expect the same from everybody on this board.
Josephine, I just want to say one thing. Josephine, you're absolutely right. And we should make it very clear that safety is for everybody, including the homeless and including the people in the shelters. We should absolutely make that clear. That's an important point.
I think we're kind of getting very heated up, which is okay.
You're doing exactly what we did.
Very, very cold out, so we need a little warmth, I guess. But why don't we see if there's any other people who'd like to, oh, I see some hands up.
So Leslie, James, and there's members from the public who would like to speak on this issue. So can we get to them?
Leslie, let's keep going.
Yeah,
Leslie?
I just wanted to comment. My reaction is not knee-jerked, nor that is there an attack. I'm just concerned that we are not servicing the community at large, and that isolated groups are being used in this regard to supposedly create stability in the neighborhood. I'm a little concerned of those people who walk the streets day or night, whether they're a person of color or whoever, who may be impacted by what was planned in these letters. There's a concern here. It's not appropriate, and I think it's something that we should concern ourselves with. Joe first started off by saying the board is wonderful, we've done a great job. If that's in fact the case, let the board do the job. And if the community organization that was created wants to do their work, let them at it. Let them do what they need to do. I'm 100% for them doing their job on their own. We should not, as a board, be supporting this organization in this way. I think what we should do is commend them for what they have done or what they're doing. Let them do their job, but let the board do their job. I think what's happening is this group is usurping the role of the board. This should not be. This is how vigilante groups get started. And it's very dangerous.
I want to say then don't support your block association because your block association is a member. This conversation to get to this point.
I don't want to even get to my block. I don't even want to go to my block association. That's why I do not go. Because that block association is run by the police department. I do not support that. Thank you.
Okay, James?
Well, if anyone wanted any entertainment tonight, they should just come to the community board.
And it's embarrassing.
Well, you know, I hear what you're saying, Joe, and I have no preconceptions about Hknc. I didn't even understand why there was such a heated debate at the full board. What I will say is, as it regards just this letter, viewed by itself, its emphasis on public safety is a little troubling because of the potential unintended consequences. I think Josephine is just trying to give voice to the possibility that, as you noted, Joe, the vast majority of people who are in affordable housing and in homeless shelters are people of color. So you did say that, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So that is a fact. So therefore, it's also a fact that when you look at the public safety issues, which are real and which we've all heard and is heartbreaking, and I've lived through it. I live on 30th. I don't like walking to 42nd from 30th because I'm worried. But that being the case, if there is no mention of anything other than public safety in this letter, I think it creates too much of an emphasis on the natural response to a public safety issue. So what Josephine was, I think, referring to, and I apologize, Josephine, I'm not just trying to speak for you, but my interpretation is that the solution to public safety is often more police presence. And the impact of more police presence, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't have more police presence, just to be very clear. I'm just saying that an unintended consequence can be impacting people of color that are just walking their dog, like me. So it's a real concern, Joe. It has nothing, just set aside Hknc. Just think about, and what I would recommend as maybe a middle ground is to add into the letter, and I think we would all agree that if a homeless shelter is run properly, then the public safety issues should be mitigated significantly. So let's focus, or not focus, but let's posit those two emphases rather than just public safety. Because if we care about the people who are in the homeless shelter, then they'll get better service. If they're getting better service, then the problems don't spill out onto the street, causing all these subsequent issues and the dominoes to fall. That's all I would suggest.
Okay, Jessica?
Yeah, I guess just to respond specifically to that though, James, I think one of the reasons this letter did not do that is because then it makes it about those very individuals. And I think we were trying, and Katie did so much work on this in trying to find that right balance, knowing that the readers, ultimate readers of this letter will not have seen the version that you all have seen and are, I think, really holding as the fuel behind this letter. Admittedly, this group did talk about the use of increased police patrol, but that is was not the intention of Hknc, nor was that something we should have led with in terms of being prescriptive. And Katie, I will say Katie and I take responsibility for including that in the letter when it didn't reflect the request of Hknc or the lens or approach that they intend to take. And so if you can all look at this letter, like literally look at it right now, as if you didn't have the other letter ever, and you were receiving this on your desk for the first time, the attempt really is to make this not specifically about the homeless population or the shelter population, but rather just about the climate in the community for all of its residents and all of its stakeholders. And I really do think, I mean, people will vote and decide how they wish. We can obviously, as was suggested, not go forward with a letter if that's how this group decides. But I really do think that when you remove that emotion of the last letter, this letter is simply asking that all community stakeholders, truly all, be heard and be recognized by their electeds to bring attention to the situation without even really trying to explain what that situation is that is existing right now. So those are my, and again, that's James, why it didn't talk about providers, because it was attempting not to focus the letter on those individuals specifically, but rather
I
so
just
many
want to
others.
clarify, I think that's, my point's being misconstrued. I wasn't talking about focusing on the individuals, I was talking about focusing on the management of the shelters.
Sorry, but even that, and that's, thank you for clarifying. That's, you're right, that's an important clarification. But even that is to say that this is a problem that originates with a particular population. And I think that this letter was attempting not to do that.
Okay. Okay, now, has everyone from the committee had their say at least once?
Leslie has his hand up.
Oh, Leslie, because then there are other people from the public that want to say something, right? I'm not watching the public.
I'll be very quick.
Yeah, okay.
I'll
go
be
ahead.
very quick. To be clear, as I stated before, I have no problem with the group itself. I have no problem with it operating separately from the board. Secondly, do we know who finances this group?
Where people
It's volunteers,
on
no
calls.
financing.
So there's meetings and minutes and all those kinds of things that are conducted.
No financing.
Okay, is that answer?
And there's meetings and there's minutes.
The minutes of these meetings?
It's sent around to its members, yes.
Sure.
Okay.
JD?
Weekly, Leslie.
Okay.
JD, did you want to say something?
Yes, I'm sorry. Attending a lot of community meetings, a lot of people are expressing concern, worry, fear, whatever. And these are people of color, people of no color, whatever. I wish we could all just step back a little and say, some people are afraid for whatever reason. How can that be addressed so people don't feel afraid? We don't know how it's done, but I wish we could just step back and not make a conclusion that it is targeting people. Can we just step back or maybe have a conversation, James and Josephine, offline, something else to try to diffuse this? And Leslie, I don't think that's what's happening.
Thank you, JD.
I'm happy to do that, JD. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
You name the time and the place, JD.
So Nellie, can you help us with people who are putting their hands up?
Yes, I will move them over and I will call them as I see them.
Thank
Hold on. First up is Randolph.
Randolph? Randolph, can you unmute yourself? We don't hear you yet, Randolph.
Hello,
There,
can you
there
hear
you
me?
go.
Hi. I think I'm unmuted. Hello?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, great. I'm really happy that people are being proactive with the new decision of the city to maybe purchase some of these hotels that are spiraling out of control financially. And I just was wanting to know how can you be in there at the table when they're making these decisions? Like, I know last time they just plopped everything kind of on us without any forewarning. So I'm kind of going back a step and just would like to know if you just what your steps are to get in there with the city before they make their decisions on what they're going to do.
Well, I guess Joe or Maria, do you want to quickly do that?
Let me take that. So normally when the city has an initiative, the board will come up with a response or policy guidelines and specifically work with our elected officials to be engaged in the public decision process. The difference with the temporary hotels is that it was all for emergency COVID relocation, not subject to the normal city programs and guidelines. And that's what makes that ask a lot easier.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank you. Nellie?
I would have said something in support of Joe.
Okay, next I have Brian Weber.
Brian Weber, yes. Brian, unmute yourself. Good to see you again, Brian.
Sorry, guys, I keep coming back to visit you. Listen, I just wanted to comment on the last item of the topic. I'm a resident of West 36th Street. I'm also a public member of this board. I'm on the Land Use and Zoning Committee. And I also am the co-chair of the West 36th Street Block Association, which has only come into existence in recent months. And it only came into existence because people knew I was on the board and they were terrified and calling me for help daily. I've met more neighbors on my street than I knew I ever had. And we tried every possible avenue. We contacted all of our elected officials. We spoke to the police daily because we live next to a police station. And my neighbors were literally getting their asses kicked. And when I say asses kicked, I mean, I have 8 neighbors out of maybe 150 that I'm in contact with that I know of that have been assaulted. And we're talking 16-year-old girl groped in front of her house by 2 men. We're talking my downstairs neighbor who had 4 teeth knocked out in a broad daylight assault. And the board has heard all of these for the past number of months. And my block association joined the Hell's Kitchen Neighborhood Coalition because we just weren't getting heard. And now that we have a coalition, we have an opportunity to speak to our elected officials. We're all volunteers. We'd all rather not be doing this, but we haven't had a voice at the table in this conversation. I've been going to a lot of community board meetings for other community boards where I hear DHS make presentations and I hear social service providers make presentations, and they all advocate on behalf of their shelter clients, and they all talk about how their shelter clients are their #1 priority, and they should be. But what I wasn't hearing in this conversation was concern for the existing neighbors. And all we're trying to do at Hell's Kitchen Neighborhood Coalition is have a conversation with our elected officials and say, hey, we've been having a lot of trouble. You poorly cited too many shelters in our neighborhood. And how do we get from point A to B? How do we deal with this specific issue? We're not trying to solve homelessness. We're not trying to solve bigger issues. We're just trying to say, what can we do now? This is, we've been told repeatedly, a temporary situation, but it's currently not working. And we see, and we still have daily issues on my block. It's improved, but how do we get to the next point? And that's all Hell's Kitchen Neighborhood Coalition is trying to do. We're trying to have a conversation with our elected officials. We're trying to have a conversation, perhaps in the next step, with police. And then perhaps in the next step, we'll have a conversation with DHS. But we need to kind of focus this and work at solving this issue. And I hope the board is able to support us. And we look at you as allies because you've been our allies all along. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Brian, could I just ask you a question? Did the coalition recently have a meeting with elected officials?
Yes, we met with them, was it 2 weeks ago?
And was that feeling a successful beginning?
It was a successful beginning. We had a lot to discuss, and we had a lot of questions too. And, you know, a lot of people who are in the coalition are members of the community board.
Right.
And they're all your neighbors. So.
Okay, just wondered how it was going.
I mean, I feel like the meeting went well. It was first steps, and you know, we have follow-up steps. But it was very preliminary. It was very much kind of going through what we've been experiencing and
okay.
and how can we as a group all work together collectively.
Okay, thank you. I sort of took my prerogative to ask you.
Yeah, and one other thing I'd just like to say, I don't think my neighbors and I, or members of the coalition, I think there's a misconception that it's us versus homeless, and that has never been the situation. our issue has been with inactivity on behalf of our elected officials and mismanagement by the city and social services. And that is what really we're trying to address here. We're, you know, and that's really what this has been about. It hasn't been what we've seen in other neighborhoods. It's actually a good group of people. A lot of them are social workers, and I think it's a fairly diverse group. I think, you know, Maria and Joe could attest to that.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I didn't want to put you on the spot, but I think it's good for everybody sort of to know, you know, what you're doing. So you're done, right, Brian? For now?
Hopefully.
Okay, Nellie, is there anyone else?
Yes, I have one more speaker.
One more speaker.
The next speaker is Serge.
Is who?
Serge Harnett.
Serge. Serge, you need to unmute yourself.
Unmute.
Yeah, we hear you.
And video, I just want to do that too. Sorry, I don't want to delay, especially when it's so late. But I want to say that I know you're all beating yourself up over that letter, but I want to commend all of you. The fact that you have disagreements is what a board is about. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And the fact that you're respectful of each other is great. I just wanted to suggest something. I live next to a facility of homeless people that moved into a hotel, and I've made friends with them. I have tried through breaking ground to help other people in the past. And I think that, I don't know how this can be done, but a lot of these people who are staying in these facilities are very afraid of speaking out against the people who are managing the facilities, because they're being threatened, they're being told that if they say this or that, they may not be able to stay there anymore. And it's really awful. And I think, you know, that I don't know how we do it, but I think we need to give them a voice. And if you stay at a hotel in a regular way, you have a voice. And I know these people have a lot to say about this. And I just think that at some point we might want to try to be clever about how we do that, so that we, number one, we don't get false information, but we also give them an opportunity to tell us what's going on. Because here we go. As Leslie Williams had mentioned, you know, the poverty pimps are out there, and there are badly run facilities. What they do is they bring in people, warehouse them, give them a meal, and then kick them out in the street and say, just go down the street. And when you have 3 or 4 facilities, it's even better for them, because they can say, oh, well, a fight occurred. That's not us, that's someone else. These places are being very poorly run, and they are promising services and opportunities, and I don't believe they're delivering them. And I think that the people, all of these people who are displaced in this way, deserve a voice in this. And I don't believe they'll ever join a Zoom call for fear of their own situation. But if there was some way that we could go and find out what they feel about their situation, I think it would shed a lot of light on who runs a good shop and who doesn't. That's it. And I just want to say thank you for this.
Thank you. Very, very good point. Now, guys, that was the last public speaker, right? Nellie, that was it?
No, I actually have one more hand raised.
One more. Okay. Henry?
The next speaker is Owen.
Oh, Owen. Owen?
Yep.
Owen, you're unmuted.
Yep, I'm unmuted. So, Serge, I appreciate that, and I agree. You know, it's clearly that these facilities are not being managed well. We know this because there is more crime. We know this because we're giving you anecdotal support of that. We see it with our own eyes. I don't think it's as simple as befriending people. I think it is about providing wraparound services. I used to run HR for Breaking Ground for a couple of years, just in 2019, so very recently. And so these facilities can be run very well, and they can mutually coexist in neighborhoods. However, that's not this case. In what I'd like to see in letters, and what I'd like to see is more data. I disagree with Josephine that I would like to see Josephine advocate for everyone who's being affected, from the people living in the buildings or in the pop-up shelters, as well as the business owners and the residents in the neighborhood. All of them should have a seat at the table. Additionally, I think I'd like to see data, hardcore data around, as Josephine pointed out, what are the arrest records? I'd love to see that included in the letter. It doesn't have to be emotional. It can be data driven. And I'm not seeing any of this. I don't see information around 911 calls. I don't see information around 311 calls. I don't see information about arrest records. I actually don't have even visibility to whether or not this COVID plan is even working, like the number of cases. None of that is being shared with us. And so I feel like a lot of this is being done in the cover of night. And it's very frustrating. So I have a year lease left here on 37th, so I'm a block away from Brian. I want to know, why should I stay here? Why should I stay here? Why should anyone stay in Hell's Kitchen? What's the value in staying in Hell's Kitchen, especially when we led this call? I sat on this call for, I don't know, 3 hours, and we started talking about the new potential conversions. I mean, I have to let you know, 50% of my building is already empty. And I can't imagine people coming in to move, even if the rent is half the rent. So that's what I had to say.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sweeney. I guess, Nellie, is that it for the public speakers?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, thank you for your help.
You're welcome.
Okay, guys, it's 1 minute, on my clock, it's 1 minute before 9 o'clock.
Maria has her hand up.
Okay, Maria?
Thank you, Betty. Thanks, Katie. So I obviously was reluctant to speak, as you can see, because I'm the last person speaking, but I just need to share some thoughts that, being transparent, I am on Hknc along with JD, Joe, and Dolores. Also, I'm on the Social and Racial Justice Task Force. And being transparent, where I'm one of the few people of color on Hknc, on this board, at my job, in the building where I live, I'm used to and mindful of thinking about issues of race. And I want to add that so far I agree with some of everyone's points, but wearing my social work hat, I feel like I heard two different conversations, one about race and one about safety. And I think that JD made a great suggestion, and I don't always agree with JD, that we have a conversation offline, and I would like to be part of that conversation. And I just want to remind the committee members that, we serve the community as a whole, and keeping in mind that numerous people came to this committee and to full board to express their concerns. And to me, this letter supports that group of people who came to us. And obviously, you have in your Dropbox Hknc documents, you can see all the organizations, all the Block associations. You can see all the groups that are part of Hknc. And the other thing I just wanted to say was that in the end, I think that what Jessica and Katie had to say about the letter is really what needs to be focused on.
Okay, thank you, Maria. JD.
Yeah, very quickly. Maria, you always agree with me. I don't know why you said that. I just want to ask Katie and Jessica if you would consider adding to the letter and anywhere that we're also concerned public safety for everybody, including our homeless and our temporary shelter people.
We have that language in there already,
You
JD.
do? Okay.
We refer to both our temporary residents and our permanent residents.
And the homeless as well.
I guess we see them as either temporary or permanent, but
Well,
they fall
I mean,
within
to
that.
Josephine's point, they deserve.
I meant non-domiciled.
That's right. Also, we're concerned about their safety as well.
Okay.
And do you want to call them, call it out as shelter residents? Do you want to call it that, call it out that way?
Our homeless population that's not domiciled, I'm not quite sure.
Shelter clients?
No, these are not, no, I'm talking about people who are on the street.
They're called unsheltered.
We're concerned about their safety as well.
Oh, unsheltered.
The word is unsheltered, yeah.
Okay, okay. Okay, that we could add to the letter.
And keeping in mind, if we're gonna mention the person, you mention the person first, then the situation.
People who are unsheltered?
Correct.
Oh, thank you. So I think we're coming to a point where we should vote on the letter that we have with the amendment of adding people who are unsheltered to the letter.
And then also the recommendation was made, hold on, let me go back, to add where we list the stakeholders, the recommendation was made to add inviting somebody from the Coalition for the Homeless, and then as well as identifying somebody who works with in the mental health community on the issues of homeless.
Well, there seemed to be some, not everybody was comfortable with that.
Well, there was some pushback, but that was one of the suggestions. So
Okay,
I don't know,
maybe what we need to do is, if I might, correct me, Joe and Maria, that we have the letter and we have an amendment to put Coalition for the Homeless as one of the participants and some representation from the mental health field. Should we start with those two suggestions and see if everybody is comfortable with that and then move on to vote for the whole letter? Would that be a good way of doing it? Okay, okay, so if you're comfortable with adding three things, okay, people who are unsheltered, Coalition for the Homeless, and I'd say mental health representative or some, I don't know what to say about that one.
Maybe advocate.
What is it?
Oh, good. A mental health advocate for the homeless or something. Like that.
Just
How about that?
advocate, mental health advocate.
And mental health
We'll try.
advocate.
Maybe we can think of a better word, but okay. So those three things added to the letter. Just raise your hand if you, oh no, do we have to take a formal vote? Well, this is good enough.
No, raise your hand is fine.
Okay, raise your hand if you're comfortable adding those three things to the letter.
But also, isn't there an issue about several people on our committee can't vote on this letter, or how does that work? I'm all confused.
We're not voting on the letter, we're voting on this, on the
amendment.
Items in it.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, so sorry, hands up again. So do I count these hands?
Betty, can you say those three things again?
Okay, people who are unsheltered, added to that, to what this concern is about, adding to come to the table, Coalition for the Homeless, and advocate for mental health issues.
Now, what do I do if I only agree with two?
Then don't approve three.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we got three on the table. So can somebody help do this thing with the hands? So
I see 9 hands raised.
Ah, good. There's nobody out in the wings here in the bleachers.
No.
Okay, so that's 9, yes. So does that a majority?
Yes.
Right, but then ask for who votes against.
What?
Ask for anybody who opposes.
Oh, okay, right, thank you. Okay, opposed? 1, 2, 3. 3, it looks like 3, okay. Okay, so, abstaining? No, okay. Now we'll go to the letter with those 3 additions
As amended.
as amended, okay? So,
And actually, can I just say something? Because I want to make sure, like, I really understand what we're saying here. I don't
you and
wanna-
me too, Katie.
Okay, but just so we're clear, the people who are unsheltered language is just in the sentence where we say, we're concerned about the safety of everyone in our community. Right now, we say including both, temporary and permanent. And now we're just going to say including those who are unsheltered, temporary or permanent, right?
Yes,
We're not saying that the safety concerns are focusing on them. We're just saying that our concern is for everybody in our community.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. All right, good.
Okay. Okay, now I think we're ready to vote for, well, actually, if we voted for these 3 things, well, I guess I just go over it again. Okay, for the
Well,
letter
it's the letter as revised.
okay?
I have one question.
Yeah.
For the revision, will that adjust the language at the end of the first paragraph that specifically and express our support for Hknc's focus on public safety? Or is that language going to be retained?
There hasn't been any discussion about changing that language. It's just, we're just saying that we support Hknc's focus on public safety. Not more than that about Hknc.
Okay.
Wait, Martin, do you have a question?
Yeah. Midtown South. It was included. And not only Midtown North.
Oh, you're right, Martin,
Oh,
you're
you're
right.
right.
We did talk about adding
We
the other
forgot-
precincts.
That
Yep.
seems like such a long time ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, we will add that too.
Yes.
And Hector's addition of the police down
Yes.
there.
Yep.
Yeah, PSA 4.
And the two police.
Yep.
Yeah, 10 precinct and PSA 4.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Yes,
Yep.
we forgot about that. I
Good
assume,
catch, Martin. Thank you.
I assume everybody is okay with that. Okay, so with the
Yep.
revisions of those 3 things we voted on, plus adding the 2 police precincts. Okay, everybody's okay what we're doing? Okay, so raise your hand if you're for that letter with those revisions. Okay. So 1, 2,
If you could please
3,
keep your hands raised.
4, 5, 6. Okay, 6 people. Okay, is that
We've
right?
lost Maria though.
Well,
and I'm
Betty,
just
are you
wondering-
voting?
Yeah, I'm voting.
So
Okay,
then I
Okay,
think
that
that's
didn't include
7.
you.
You didn't lose me. I'm present, not eligible.
Sorry. Sorry.
You have to
okay.
just ask Betty, you've done in favor, now do against,
No,
and
wait,
then abstain, and then present not eligible.
I know, but I just wanted to be sure the people who are in favor. I've looked and found 6 people or 7 people,
It was 6, not including you.
but I can vote.
Right.
So then it's 7.
Yes.
You're number 7.
7. Okay, then we've got people opposed. Raise your hand if you're opposed. 1, 2, 2. And then abstaining.
Josephine is abstaining.
Okay, so that's 1. And then Joe and Maria, you're abstaining?
Present not eligible.
No,
Right.
present not
Oh, no,
eligible.
no, I'm sorry, present but not eligible.
And that's 3 of you?
No, 4.
4.
4.
4.
That's Joe, Maria, and
Dolores.
Dolores. Okay.
And
so- What?
And JD.
Oh, and JD, so that includes JD. Okay, because you're a member of the coalition.
I my block association is, I go to the meetings, it's.
Well, I
don't
don't know. Does that make you present but not eligible?
It doesn't matter. Yeah, that's fine.
Or should we put you with a different category of in favor or opposed?
I'm opposed to everything all the time.
I think he needs to be P&E, Betty. P&E.
Yeah, Betty.
P&E.
Okay, okay, so seven
JD's
people,
full of jokes all the time.
7 people for, 2 opposed, 1 abstaining, and 4 present but not eligible. So does this pass?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, it's been fun. I'm retiring from this task.
Is there a motion to adjourn for this evening?
Wait, hold on.
Oh, wait.
What?
New,
Sorry.
old, new bit, I don't know, there's something.
Joe, why do you always do that? There is
I don't know. It's
something.
9/11.
I know, we'll be done very quickly. Katie sent an email this evening to the committee about the Gotham documents.
Actually, I don't even know if it went out. I'll check it afterwards, but it'll come out this evening, right? About anybody who wants to join to help review the Gotham documents that we sent the letter about in December.
Which
We need some extra-
which they didn't tell us that, which we didn't get forever, and then again, a huge lack of time here.
Right.
So yes, right. This is a crazy thing, right?
But for those of you, whether or not you remember, you'll see it in the email that I'm sending out to all of you. Just we have all these documents now that need to be reviewed about this tax credit and this confusion for folks. And if anybody is interested in reviewing this and helping think it through and analyze it, and that would be awesome. Just respond to the email that I send out. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should do it. We should do it tonight. I think. Katie, can we do it tonight?
Always full of jokes. And then one more thing, Katie, you're up again because the Social and Racial Justice Task Force.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. So at our next month's meeting, so in March, right? We're in February. In March, at the task force meeting, we're going to have a forum on health disparities. And so we just wanted to let you all know. And if anybody, so we're going to be looking for some people to speak. And so we want to get some of the health organizations in our district involved, but also somebody who can sort of speak to the data about health disparities and frankly, the historical reasons for like why so many people of color are understandably very concerned about getting the vaccine now and maternal mortality rates. There are all sorts of reasons that we want to focus on health disparities. So if anybody has any ideas or wants to help plan this forum, that again will be at the next task force meeting, please let me know. Leslie has his hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me? Good. I've reached out to Mount Sinai after talking to Maria. So I've reached out to them and hopefully we'll hear back from them shortly.
Thank you. And
Awesome.
Hector?
And Katie, can I just suggest that because that's such a huge issue, right?
Yeah.
Again, the focus, and I'm going to really suggest, because I'm seeing this every day and working with a vast range of tenants, right? It's working with people to go through the issue of vaccine and what are the issues that whatever, because I am getting desperate now as a provider that there are people who are eligible who will not get vaccinated, who are at the highest risk groups. If we can provide a service to our community, that would be a real timely and specific one, as opposed to, and I said before, the broad issues, bring it down to today and accomplishing. If we can do a huge community forum about this and get education out there, my God, I mean, if we had a different president, people would not feel as uncomfortable. Obviously, that's part of the issue floating into
Right.
here.
It's one of the things we've talked about is trying to make sure that there are people who are trusted, who can be.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I went so far as having my picture taken with the vaccine in order for tenants who know me and trust me to say, you got to try, you got to do this to see what it is. But I mean, that would really help us, our community. I think that'd be really, really helpful.
Right. Yeah, but we also really want to help understand or acknowledge that there are real reasons why people are so, concerned, and sort of and try and unpack some of that. Yeah.
Right, but focusing on that as opposed to the broader disparity, so we can actually help bring and affect people's lives and provide safety for them. My God, their health is I'm concerned about.
Hector?
Yeah, just briefly, I'm sorry I didn't present this sooner, but just wanted to give you a heads up. I'm working closely with Miguel Acevedo at the at the Fulton Houses Tenants Association. We have a senior center here that's being unused, and we're trying to push the state to try to get it as a vaccination center. So the only obstacle we're running into, like everybody else, is not enough vaccines to go around. So hopefully, I don't know, I'll send an email out to everybody concerning it a little bit more in detail, because basically we could use it down here because it's underserved, obviously, in the vicinity here. Maybe try to get some support from the community board to maybe
Hector,
promote that
actually,
as a center. Yeah.
I've been working with the Guild, so it would be Fulton, Hudson Guild, and Hartley House all acting as vaccine centers if we get the state to support it.
That would be great.
Right. Yeah, that'd be great too. But like I said, we have a senior center being unused over here in Fulton Houses, so I'd like to add that to the list as well.
Jessica?
Yeah, just very, very briefly. I wanted to acknowledge that Owen joined us and he made some comment, like raised his concern about things that were not in the letter that we ultimately did not address, which I think is fine and appropriate. But I also want to say that a lot of the things that he raised, and I don't know if he's still on with us, are things that we have written letters about in the past and that this group has taken on. And so I just want to encourage, I can't see people who are not part of the board on the screen right now, but I want to encourage people that like this is a moment in time in a conversation, and what was voted on today reflects that moment in time, but that the concerns of the Hell's Kitchen residents and of all kinds have been discussed and letters have been written, and we've been advocates on that. And I just wanted to make sure that he knew that, and that this is a place that he can continue to come and voice those concerns and shouldn't feel frustrated that today's letter didn't respond to that, but that this group is often thinking about those things. That's all.
Thanks, Jessica. Joe, Brian Lewis has his hand up.
Is it a motion to adjourn, Brian Lewis?
Hold on. I just want to quickly tell Jessica, I did let
Nellie, can you bring him over though?
For the budget committee that we do advocate for seniors and meals, et cetera. That has been a continual top request. So I did give you props on that, Jessica.
And I just want to announce next month is Social Work History Month and Women's History Month. Brian?
Hi, everybody. Sadly, not in a motion to adjourn, but I will do this in less than 10 seconds. You have till Monday, 5 p.m., February 22nd to get your applications in to the community board, reapplicants and new applicants especially. You all have my contact information. If not, please reach out to CB4 and they can get it to you if you're a member of the public, because I don't think I can actually post it in the link here. But yeah, that's it. Have a good night.
But you promised to double all of our salaries.
Yeah, I've mentioned that before. 0 times infinity is 0, so I can do that for you.
Double 0. You're all getting double 0.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes, motion to adjourn from Dolores. A second.
Second.
All those in favor of running for the hills for tonight. Thank you all. And
good night. It was good to see everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
All right, now.